Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have a look at the latest of what is going on up in the stratosphere. Now we've had a look at this quite a lot over the last month or two, and we had thought we'd see a major warming perhaps into the middle or end of January. Now that didn't quite come out as initially thought. It was a warming and it did displace the polar vortex, but not to the extent that would produce colder weather, and it has produced some differences down into the troposphere, and it's why we've got very cold air pushed over Greenland at the moment, very cold air in Northeast America, and we have got very strong low pressure in the Atlantic, and also why we've got this amplification and higher pressure building over top of us towards Scandinavia. Now it's not producing anything too cold at the surface, but it has provided some impacts, but not what we initially anticipated a few weeks ago. It was touch and go whether it was a major warming or was a minor warning, and in the end it did end up being a minor warning. And we can still see on this latest GFS run that we have still got the remnants of that warming, but the polar vortex is still intact, weaker than normal, but intact on our side of the northern hemisphere. But over the last few days and the last week in general, we've seen an increased signal for another potentially major warming, and actually a higher probability of this major warming, a lot more strength within the ensemble members for it through the middle of February. Now it is quite late in the winter to be seeing a major warming that would produce bitterly cold weather in the actual winter period, but this could plunge us very cold towards the end of February into March as well, into early spring. Now that is something we do need to keep an eye on, because it could prolong winter for at least another month or so, and this is something that could produce very cold easterly winds, as we have seen through the years, where we've seen very cold March and April, colder than the actual winter before it had been. So that's why, even though, yes, this warming looks likely to come late in the winter, the last couple of weeks of the actual winter period, and not really affect us until perhaps early spring, it's still something we do need to have a look at. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. We'll focus on the stratosphere today, so if you are looking for what the models are showing on the day-to-day basis, do check out yesterday's video, as not too much has changed in regards to that. Generally still high pressure over the top of us for the foreseeable future, with generally cool conditions, overnight frosts into early next week, especially in areas in the south. So do check out yesterday's video if you are interested in that. But we will start on what the latest GFS operational run is showing. We'll have a look at what it's showing with the slice through the atmosphere, and we'll have a look at the ECMWF and GFS ensembles as well, to just show that there is very strong support for at least a major warming, perhaps something that could really obliterate the polar vortex. So as I said, if we do start on the GFS, you can still see the minor warmings that have been taking place over the last week or two, still over the North Pole, but the polar vortex will return more towards the North Pole, but still centred towards the European side of the Northern Hemisphere. But as we head into the middle of February, look at this, another major warming appearing over Russia and Siberia, and it completely obliterates the polar vortex, heading into the North Pole with around temperatures up towards 0 degrees at 10 HPA. And you can see all those blues of where the polar vortex is completely obliterated, showing those temperatures are warming up significantly. The polar vortex will still be there in some capacity. If we do have a look at the 10 HPA winds, you can see it still is there in some capacity, but right over the North Pole, it's been completely shoved away and has been pretty destroyed as it does. And you can see towards the UK, the stratospheric winds coming in from the north and not from the west, where you'd expect them to be normally. So again, indicative of a major sudden stratospheric warming. Now again, as I said, this is likely really only to happen towards the middle of February, towards the end of February, but it is still going to potentially provide some big impacts towards right at the end of February into early spring. And of course, it's sometimes difficult to see exactly what's going on this chart, and if we do have a look at the slice through the atmosphere, you'll be able to see this a lot better. Now, of course, on the left chart, you can see anything sort of orange, reds and pinks are normal zonal mean winds coming in from the west, and you can see through the different pressure levels how strong those westerly winds are. So you get to greens and lighter blues, that's a reversal in those zonal mean winds down towards an easterly direction, and anything below that would be indicative of winds generally coming in from the easterly direction. Now you can see over the course of the next week to 10 days, generally higher up in the atmosphere, we've got quite a strong westerly flow. Nothing too crazy, but still strong enough to just keep us with a general westerly outcome. Previous to this, we had seen some blues up in the stratosphere, but they never really propagated through the atmosphere, and they did only last a couple of days. Towards the surface, we're still seeing generally mixed, but no distinctive pattern. But you can look at the top right of this left chart, very, very strong easterly winds coming up in the stratosphere, indicative of a major southern stratospheric warming. No signs of it exactly pushing through the atmosphere yet, but that is something we need to keep an eye on nearer the time. But yeah, huge reversal in the zone. Winds lasting here for at least a week, and this is a pretty strong signal now. Now on the right chart, you can see these are the anomalies. Anything red or orange is above average zonal mean winds, and anything blue is below average. Below average doesn't necessarily mean easterly winds, but it does mean below average for the time of year. But anything that's really dark blue does mean easterly winds. So you can see through most of the atmosphere for the next week, it's pretty average to above average in terms of zonal mean winds, but slowly as we head through the middle to second half of February, it stays still average to above average in the troposphere, but up in the stratosphere, huge negative anomalies off the chart, -60 in terms of anomaly into the middle to end of February, and you'd expect that to propagate through the atmosphere towards the end of the month as well. We're not seeing that yet, but that is something expected, and that's why we'd only really see any impacts of this in the end of February, perhaps start of March. Now, if we have a look at the ensembles, again, because we've got to have ensemble support for this sort of pattern, or one single GFS run cannot be proof that anything's going to be happening, but you can see we saw that warming about a week ago now, down towards around 10 meters per second, so a good 10 to 15 meters per second below average for the time of year, but not a major southern stratospheric warming where we need to get those winds about 10 meters per second slower, down towards zero. But you can see a warming at the moment, a strengthening at the moment, but another major warming coming, and the green lines, which are the GFS ensembles, the majority are down towards zero or well below zero. And you can see those grey lines there, that is the limits of where we've ever seen the stratospheric winds. So some of these ensemble members are getting down to record weak levels, and you can see quite a few spikes around this period through January, February into early March, because that is generally where we typically see most southern stratospheric warmings. This would be occurring towards sort of the second half of where we'd expect southern stratospheric warmings to generally occur, but it still could provide significant impacts. And some of these members have it been really the final warming. Some of these CFS longer range charts have it re-strengthening, but most of them keep it around 0 meters per second all the way into early March, which really would slow down any westerly winds throughout the atmosphere. If we do finally have a look at the ECMWF line charts, very similar but more zoomed in just on the ECMWF ensemble members, you can see we're slightly above average in terms of zonal mean winds at the moment, 25 to 30 meters per second, but that is plunging within the next 10 days or so, and the majority of ensemble members getting us down to around 0 meters per second, some getting much lower, some staying a little bit higher, but the majority are actually below average. So another pretty minor warning is guaranteed, and looking likely now we're going to be seeing a major warming from the models up in the stratosphere. What this will entail down on the surface, we cannot say for certain, but it could increase the probability of perhaps a cold last week to 10 days of February, and perhaps a cold March as well. It would promote blocking over in the northern hemisphere, and even though, yes, into March the sun strength is getting quite strong, it would limit any settling snow in the day and any major cold in the day, but it doesn't mean those air masses won't be bitterly cold. It won't mean the wind chill is any milder, and it won't mean that we won't see snow overnight widely as well with this sort of pattern. Remember, the beast from the east came in the last week of February into early March. I would be surprised if this warming here did cause something like that, and in that same time frame. But it just shows you that late winter into early spring can still provide significant cold weather, even though it's not the best time really for colder weather. We are going into the spring where most people want to get a bit warm. We've got through 3 months of miserable colder weather, and just as we want it to start getting warmer, we get plunged back into winter's depths. But that is something that could happen. Those air masses over the northern hemisphere are starting very slowly to warm up now, sort of peaking around the middle to end of January in terms of their cold level. But even into early March, we still got a lot of cold air to our north, and if we did see significant blocking, we could see our coldest weather of the whole winter coming up here, if that came off. We'll have to see exactly how it does happen and how it does sort of plan out, but definitely giving a higher chance than normal of something colder into early spring. So, of course, we'll keep an eye on this. Again, we won't be doing too many updates on it. It is very much a long-winded thing that most likely won't be occurring for a number of weeks now in terms of the actual warming, probably in around the 15th to 20th of February, just looking at these models at the moment, so at least 2 weeks. But we will have to see, and any impacts perhaps 3 or 4 weeks. So it is definitely something longer range, and at the moment we won't be really impacted by this at all, but it is just something we do need to keep an eye on in the longer range. And of course, perhaps in a couple of weeks' time, we may start to see some very long-range GFS charts starting to pick up on something like this, and that will provide a big spanner in the works into early spring. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you are looking for very cold weather, this is a good sign, I'd guess, into the late winter, early spring. But if you are looking for something a bit warmer coming up soon, this is not a good sign, as it could push colder weather with higher probabilities in springtime, perhaps even into as late as April time. So yeah, it could prolong coolish conditions for quite a time if this did come off. But there still is an if there. Things can change, but the signal at the moment is pretty strong. So anyway, as I said, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.